One was on the first presentation, and I'd like to know if you can if you can streamline that and find out what's just available for nonprofits. My problem is I'm involved in a nonprofit agency, so when I start looking at grants, I get all excited, and then I get through 5 pages, and at the bottom I go, oh, it's only for charities. So is
That was with the
built into
database.
Yeah, the database.
Could that work, guys? With either Imagine or?
Well, with I guess what we try to do with our databases, yeah, a lot of them just both because of the preferences of foundations and also with this Canada Revenue Agency rules, there are sort of rules that they have to follow for who they can give grants to. Registered charities and a couple other people that are also considered qualified donees by the Canada Revenue Agency. So most registered foundations sort of have to give to charities. If they're not a registered foundation, like other programs don't tend to be as strict, like company donations programs or government grant programs don't necessarily have that rule. What we'll do is if it's not a registered foundation, we'll add a note whether or not, if you can't get funds, if you're not a charity, we'll put a note on the profile so that you can see right away if that's the case or not. But for the most part, with registered foundations, it's really hard to get a grant from them if you're not. You can partner with a registered charity. That is an option for you. I don't know if you've looked at sort of documentation for how to do that. Usually what's required is you get a letter sent to the funder that's from the charity that you're sort of partnering with. Have you looked at that before? Or?
Yeah, and it costs.
Okay,
I mean,
it's not
the
worth
whole
it?
thing costs, but if you're going after, depending on the size of the grant, but
Right,
if you're going after a $40,000 grant, by
right,
the time you take your grant writer, your evaluation,
yeah.
and then the chunk over here, you aren't left with a lot to actually run your program, so
Yeah.
that is a problem.
Okay, yeah, for the most part, registered Canadian foundations won't give unless you're a registered charity or will fall under one of the other groups, like arts organizations and sports teams and the other groups that qualify. But sometimes with the company donations programs, they don't follow the same regulations as they can, or government programs. But again, you have to, sometimes they won't, so it's something you just have to look for right away, unfortunately.
It's like we got 2 ends of the spectrum, because when we talk about grassroots, most of the grassroots organizations are in fact nonprofits, because they advocate. That's part of the caveat of choosing to be a nonprofit, and
Sure.
maybe the youth, or maybe somebody else has.
Yeah.
Maybe, do you want to get your
Yeah,
Jessica?
so one response is we really focus on government grants.
Yeah.
And so we can't say we have all of the government grants for Ontario. We're focused on government grants and we have foundations. We're also focusing on Ontario. So if you just choose national funders and Ontario and get rid of the foundations, there's the 300 government grants that are in our system for Ontario and for national. And those all should have deadlines if they have them. So we can do that. But I guess the question that you had of advocacy or not, the one thing is getting charitable status takes up to what, 2 years, 18 months, 2 years?
Very rarely 2 years.
Yeah,
but
it's getting longer
it's
all the
possible.
time.
It's actually, it's declined a bit in the past year because they've increased their staff who are involved in that, but it still takes about 6 months on average.
The advocacy thing to me is a bit of a what's the term, canard, in terms of groups are afraid of doing advocacy, and they don't often report it in T3010s. But nonprofits, charities can do a lot more advocacy, and using 10% of your budget for advocacy is a lot of nonprofits that do advocacy do not spend
No,
more than 10%.
nonprofits do. They can use their whole budget for
Yeah,
advocacy.
but even
Charities can't.
charities can use 10%, and that's of your total budget. No, you can use 10%, and people don't get whacked for that. I haven't seen charities get in trouble for the 10%. With this government, there's been other questions about how much advocacy can you do, but not a question about percentage of budget.
Jessica,